There's this really vivid image lots of us have when we think of an Irish face, right? It's often that very striking look. Freckled skin, maybe turns pink in the sun, those really intense green eyes that seem to hold all sorts of stories, and hair that's, somewhere between gold, auburn, or fiery red.
That classic picture.
Exactly. And maybe you picture strong jaw lines, a gentle smile perhaps, and sometimes even that hint of ancient melancholy sort of etched in the features. It feels familiar, almost iconic, but there's so much more going on. But here's the twist, the fascinating truth that kind of challenges that image straight away. Not all Irish people look like that. Not even close sometimes.
That's right.
If you spend any time in Ireland or even just meet people from the huge global diaspora, you'll see, raven black hair.
Yeah.
Features that might make you think of, say, the Mediterranean.
Yeah, definitely.
Some people are really tall and broad, others are quite small and wiry, and actually, a surprising number show traits you might associate more with Scandinavia.
Yeah.
It really flips that stereotype on its head. So, this leads us right to the core mystery we want to dig into today. Why? Why is there such a striking diversity? Why do Irish people look so different? Not just compared to other Europeans, but even, really different from each other.
That's the wonderful complexity we're exploring today. This deep dive is really a journey back through time. We'll be using what geneticists are uncovering, what anthropologists observe, and of course what historians tell us about all those layers of migration and settlement.
All right.
We're looking beyond just the physical features. We're trying to understand the story that's written in the DNA and the long history of the island. It's about seeing the reality behind the sometimes quite narrow stereotype.
Okay, so let's start with what feels like a bit of a paradox. Ireland's unique place in history. It was one of the very last parts of Europe to be settled by humans way out on the edge.
That's key.
And yet, almost counterintuitively, it ended up being one of the most genetically preserved regions in Europe. How do those two things fit together? What does that preservation actually mean?
It's a really crucial point, and it largely boils down to Ireland's relative isolation. Being out there on the Atlantic edge meant it sort of sidestepped some of the really massive, rapid genetic mixing that swept across mainland Europe.
Ah, okay. Like during the Roman Empire, for instance.
Exactly, or the Moorish influence in Iberia, the Ottoman reach in the Balkans. Ireland didn't experience those large-scale population shifts in quite the same way. The gene flow was, let's say, slower, more like a trickle than a flood, which allowed earlier genetic signatures to stick around more prominently.
Okay, so isolated, but not like hermetically sealed, right? You mentioned those influences were slower, more incremental. How do we square that idea of a genetic time capsule with the fact that there were really significant migrations later on? The Vikings, the Normans, didn't they mix things up? Doesn't that contradict being preserved?
That's precisely the nuance we need to grasp.
Yeah.
The modern Irish genome isn't pure, which is a pretty misleading term in genetics anyway.
Right.
It's better described as ancient. It's like a rich tapestry woven from many different threads over a very long time. It reflects this layered ancestry that arrived and, crucially, integrated over millennia.
So layer upon layer.
Exactly. We're talking about influences from the first Mesolithic hunter-gatherers who got there maybe 8,000 years ago. Then you have the Neolithic farmers arriving later from the Middle East, bringing agriculture.
A huge shift.
Massive. Then after them, the Indo-European steppe herders, the ones linked to the bell beaker culture, who seem to have left a particularly strong genetic mark across Western Europe, including Ireland.
Okay.
And then much, much later, you get the Norse Vikings, the Normans coming over from France, and of course, centuries of interaction and influence from Britain.
Right. A lot of different inputs.
But the key thing is, while there was definitely a mixture, it happened over these vast stretches of time, quite gradually. This allowed certain unique combinations of traits, maybe linked to those earlier groups, to become more concentrated and distinct compared to places that saw more sudden, dramatic population replacements or influxes.
That makes a lot more sense. It's not about being untouched. It's about the way those layers settled over time.
Okay, so with that historical foundation, this idea of a population that's both anciently preserved and subtly layered, it's fascinating to see how those migrations and Ireland's specific environment show up in the physical traits.
Absolutely.
Let's really zero in on some of those, maybe the iconic ones, and connect them to the science. How about we start with skin tone? We often hear Ireland has one of the highest rates of fair skin in the world. Just how fair are we talking?
The numbers really do paint a picture. There was a study in 2020 from Trinity College Dublin that got quite specific. It found that, get this, 53% of Irish people are Fitzpatrick type I.
Type I. That's the type that always burns, never tans. Exactly. Very fair, highly sun-sensitive. And then another 36% are type 2, which is fair skin that usually burns first but might tan just a little bit eventually.
Wow, so add that up.
You're looking at over 89% of the population with really quite low melanin production. And the crucial insight here is that this isn't just random chance, it's widely understood as a biological adaptation.
For vitamin D.
Precisely. It's a way to maximize vitamin D absorption from sunlight in a climate like Ireland's, which is often cloudy and doesn't get intense, prolonged sun exposure for much of the year. The body basically adapted to make the most of the available UV light.
So that explains the general fairness.
Hmm.
But within that, there's that other really distinctive feature, freckles. They seem almost synonymous with the Irish look sometimes. How does the science explain why freckles are so common there? And you hear about the MC1R gene, after that plane to the skin often looking pinkish or being so sun-prone.
Yeah, the MC1R gene is central to that part of the story. This gene is famously linked to both red hair and the tendency to freckle, and studies show it's present in over 34% of Irish individuals.
34%, that's incredibly high globally, isn't it?
It's one of the highest rates, yes. And this isn't just about, cute dots on the nose. It's a key reason why Irish skin often has that characteristic pinkish undertone, why it's so susceptible to sunburn and freckling, and why it can sometimes appear almost translucent, where you can easily see veins or flushing.
Right.
Variants in MC1R generally lead to lower production of the protective dark melanin, eumelanin, and more of the reddish pheomelanin, resulting in that very distinct skin type.
Incredible how much influence one gene can have visually. Okay, let's move from skin to another classic Irish trait, eye color. There's this strong association between green eyes and Ireland. Turns out it's not just a myth, is it? Ireland actually leads the world percentage-wise for green eyes.
It does. A European phenotypic survey from 2019 gave some interesting figures. It found 46% of Irish people have blue eyes, which is also very high.
Still the majority then.
Yes, but then you have a really significant chunk, 30%, with green or hazel eyes, and only about 24% with brown eyes, which is low for European populations.
So why so much green?
Well, green eyes are genetically quite interesting. They're a rare recessive trait globally. They result from having low levels of melanin in the iris. It's kind of a structural color effect mixed with a little bit of light brown pigment. It likely originated somewhere in Northwest Europe.
And in Ireland.
Because of those long periods of relative genetic isolation we talked about, with less gene flow coming in from populations with predominantly darker eyes, this rare trait wasn't diluted out. Instead, it persisted and became unusually concentrated.
And it's not even spread evenly across the islands, right? I read somewhere that in places like Connacht and Donegal, the west and northwest, the frequency of green or hazel eyes can get close to 40%.
That's right. Astonishingly high figures, even compared to other parts of Ireland or Europe. It really hints at these deep regional pockets of genetic continuity stretching back a very long time.
Amazing. Okay, let's talk hair, color and texture. We absolutely have to tackle the redhead stereotype. And, well, it is rooted in truth, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Ireland does have the highest percentage of natural redheads in the world, even edging out Scotland slightly. Genetic studies, like one from 2017, suggest somewhere between 10 and 13% of the Irish population are natural redheads.
10 to 13%. That's significant.
It is. And perhaps even more telling, around 40% of Irish people carry at least one copy of the main red hair associated variant of that MC1R gene we discussed.
40% carry the gene, even if they aren't redheads themselves.
Exactly, which explains why red hair pops up unexpectedly sometimes. But here's the crucial insight that often gets missed. While red hair is culturally iconic, the full spectrum of hair color in Ireland is much broader.
Right, it's not all redheads.
Not at all. Actually, the most common hair color group is medium to dark brown, that's about 37%. Then you have blonde or dark blonde at around 28%. Red or auburn is that 13% we mentioned. And significantly, about 22% have black or jet black hair.
22% black hair. That's a really important statistic, isn't it? Because it means that striking high contrast look very dark hair against very pale skin is actually just as common, if not more common in some areas, and just as authentically Irish as red hair.
Precisely. It completely challenges that single, narrow stereotype and really underscores the diverse genetic inputs, those Neolithic farmer roots perhaps, alongside the Celtic and Viking influences.
It really does paint a much richer picture. So, okay, what about texture? Does that tell a similar story of diversity?
It does, yeah. The data generally shows about 61% of Irish people have straight hair, around 28% have wavy hair, and about 11% have curly hair. And interestingly, curly hair seems to be a bit more common among people with ancestry from the western and coastal regions.
Any idea why?
Again, it likely ties back to that complex blend of ancestries. You have early Celtic populations, then the Viking admixture, which probably brought more straight, lighter hair variants, and also those older Neolithic farming lineages, possibly from southern Europe or the Mediterranean, which might have contributed darker and sometimes curlier hair traits. It's all mixed together.
Fascinating how it all connects back. Okay, facial structure. What do anthropologists typically point to? I feel like I've heard descriptions like broad foreheads, maybe high cheekbones, often straight or slightly concave noses, and softer jawlines, particularly in women. And sometimes that description of a slight hooding or droop in the eyelids, contributing to that sort of thoughtful or melancholic look.
Those descriptions do align with some traditional anthropological observations, yeah. But just like with hair or eyes, the actual variation on the ground is significant and really interesting. A facial morphology study from 2021 actually grouped Irish faces into three main types.
Oh, really? What were they?
About 38% were classified as mesocephalic, which means kind of balanced proportions. Then around 29% were dolichocephalic, longer and narrower faces. And about 33% were brachycephalic, shorter and wider faces. And that last type, the shorter, wider face, was found to be a bit more common in those western coastal populations again.
So even the basic skull shape varies quite a bit.
Exactly. It powerfully illustrates there isn't just one Irish bone blueprint. Even within the island, the sheer variety of facial architecture is proof of those ancient layered migrations and regional continuities we've been discussing.
And digging into that variation, you mentioned regional differences. Like in the southeast and east, you might see more features associated with later arrivals.
That's right. In those areas particularly, you might see individuals carrying facial traits more commonly associated with Anglo-Saxon or Norman ancestry, perhaps slightly sharper jaws, narrower eye settings, maybe longer noses. It shows how those later waves also left their distinct marks on the population.
Okay. And then there's the whole discussion around what's sometimes called the Black Irish. What's the story there?
Right, the Black Irish. This term usually refers to people with that combination of dark, often black hair, maybe slightly darker or olive skin undertones, and sometimes deep-set eyes. These features tend to be noted more often in the West and Northwest.
And the origin theories.
Well, it's sometimes a bit controversial and debated, but often these traits are hypothetically linked to very ancient gene flow, perhaps from Iberia, Spain, or Portugal, or even potentially North Africa, maybe through ancient maritime trade routes, or famously the folklore around survivors from the Spanish Armada shipwrecks in the 16th century, though the genetic impact of that is likely small. It just adds another layer, another potential thread in that complex weave of Irish ancestry.
It really does show how many different streams might have fed into the modern Irish look. Okay, finally, let's touch on height and build. You hear that the Irish, like many populations, have gotten taller. Is that change significant?
Oh, it's quite dramatic, actually, especially over the last century or so. If you look at recent Eurostat data, say from 2022, the average height for Irish men is now around 178.2 centimeters.
Which is
About 5 foot 10 inches. And for women, it's about 165.2 centimeters, so roughly 5 foot 5. Now, what's really remarkable is that this represents roughly a 7-centimeter increase, nearly 3 inches, just since 1960.
Wow, 7 centimeters in just over 60 years. That's a huge jump. What's driving that?
It's almost entirely attributed to environmental factors, not genetics changing that fast. We're talking vastly improved nutrition, much better access to healthcare, and generally higher living standards compared to, say, the mid-20th century or earlier.
So it really shows how much environment shapes us physically.
Absolutely. It highlights how dynamic these traits can be. It makes you question how much of what we perceive as a fixed look is actually influenced by the conditions people live in.
That's a really good point. But despite getting taller on average, there's still maybe a traditional Irish physique people might recognize, isn't there? A sort of stockier build.
Yes, absolutely. If you look back historically, and perhaps drawing on older genetic adaptations, the traditional Irish physique was often described as shorter, more compact, often with broad shoulders, muscular builds, quite stocky frames.
Adapted for the work they did.
Exactly. These were likely adaptations suited for generations of farming, fishing, and other physically demanding labor. often in tougher conditions. And you can still see echoes of that more rugged, compact build today, perhaps more noticeably in some regions like Connacht and Munster, where those older ways of life and maybe genetic lines persisted longer.
Okay, so we've looked at the skin, eyes, hair, face, build, all this incredible physical diversity and the science behind it. What does it all mean, though? Beyond the biology, this brings us to maybe the more profound part of the conversation, perhaps the slightly uncomfortable bit. There's this persistent, powerful cultural stereotype of what someone Irish is supposed to look like. The pale skin, red hair, freckles, blue eyes package. But holding on to that narrow image, it actually kind of erases a really long and incredibly vibrant history, doesn't it? A history of immigration, of diaspora, of diversity within Ireland itself.
It absolutely does, and sometimes we forget just how long and how diverse that history is. Consider this. There's been an Irish Jewish community since the 12th century.
Wow, since the 12th century.
Yeah. People of African descent from West Africa and the Caribbean started arriving in the 18th and 19th centuries. And today, you look at modern Ireland, and children of Chinese, Irish, or Pakistani Irish heritage are among the fastest growing groups.
Right.
And here's a statistic that really makes you think. According to the 2020 census data for Dublin, over 19% of babies born there had at least one parent who wasn't Irish born.
Nearly 1 in 5 in the capital.
Exactly. So the key insight here is that this rich, ongoing story of demographic change and diversity is often completely missed or even implicitly denied when we cling to outdated visual stereotypes. It really begs the question, why does such a narrow stereotype persist when the reality is so much more complex and interesting?
It's a powerful point. And yet, despite that reality, you still hear commentary, sometimes explicitly, sometimes implicitly, about who looks Irish and who doesn't. And that can really impact people, mixed-race citizens, recent immigrants, even second- or third-generation kids who don't happen to fit that narrow visual mold. It must be deeply alienating.
It can be, but geneticists offer a really strong counterargument to relying on appearance. There's a big genome-wide association study in 2018, and the researchers basically concluded, I'm paraphrasing, that Irish people carry all these layers of ancestry, from ancient Iberians, from Scandinavians, from Neolithic farmers with Middle Eastern origins, alongside the Celtic base. And because of that complex mix, visual appearance is actually a very poor indicator of cultural or national belonging.
So the science itself says don't judge a book by its cover.
Pretty much. It really drives home the fundamental truth.
Yeah.
You simply don't have to look a certain way to be Irish. Your genetic heritage is complex, your cultural identity is complex, and neither can be reduced to a simple checklist of physical features.
That's such an important message, especially when you think about the sheer global scale of Irish identity. I mean, maybe more than any other country, Ireland's identity is shaped by its diaspora, right?
Absolutely.
There's something like 70 million people around the world who claim Irish ancestry. Huge numbers in the U.S., Australia, Canada, Argentina, Britain, just everywhere.
And this creates this really fascinating paradox of identity, doesn't it? What does Irishness even look like when it's been filtered through generations living in Chicago or Sydney or Liverpool or Cape Town?
Yeah.
Sometimes, sure, it's the classic red hair and freckles that have passed down and maybe even become concentrated in some families. But other times, it's dark curly hair and maybe tanner skin. Or it could be features that reflect mixing with totally different populations. And sometimes, honestly, it's nothing visual at all.
Just the name, eh?
Exactly. Just a name or a family story, maybe a song they know, or just a feeling of connection. The really profound thing, the paradox, is that the more the Irish traveled and inevitably mixed with other groups around the world, the more their average physical appearance diversified. Yet somehow that sense of identity, that connection back to Ireland, often remained incredibly strong. It's a powerful testament to culture and history enduring beyond just looks.
So let's try and pull all these threads together then. The Irish face, if we can even call it that, it isn't just Celtic, is it?
No, not by a long shot.
It's got Indo-European roots, Neolithic farmer roots, Viking influences, Norman influence. It might carry faint whispers of Iberian or Moorish connections from ancient times. It's been shaped by centuries of interaction with Britain. It reflects modern immigration. It reflects the global diaspora. It's constantly evolving, which is exactly why it's impossible and wrong, really, to try and sum it up in one single static image.
Yeah.
If you try to define it too narrowly, you fundamentally misunderstand everything that went into making it and everything that continues to shape it.
Precisely put. Ireland isn't one look. It's a vibrant palette. It's a living testament to literally millennia of Human movement, adaptation, interaction, cultural exchange. It truly is a story, not a stereotype.
A 10,000-year-old story.
Yeah. At least. And it's kept alive in those freckles, yes, but also in the dark hair, in the smiles, in the incredible contrasts you see, and of course in the voices and the culture. What makes Irish people look so different isn't just that they might look different from, say, Italians or Swedes, but that they hold on to the echoes of the very ancient past while weaving in threads of the new, slowly, sometimes subtly, but always creating something unmistakably Irish.
So the next time you meet someone who tells you they're Irish, maybe take a second look. Lean into that curiosity we talked about. Perhaps you'll see a hint of that ancient history etched in their cheekbones, that blend of migrations.
Hmm.
Or maybe 1,000 years of Atlantic wind and rain reflected in the texture of their skin. Or perhaps you'll see the incredible journey of the diaspora reflected in their eyes, carrying stories from halfway across the world.
Whatever you see, I think the key takeaway is this. To be Irish is not about fitting into some predetermined visual mold. It's about carrying a mosaic, a rich, complex, and ever-changing mosaic of history, culture, and ancestry.